proudly announce today that we have successfully detonated a 20-megaton hydrogen bomb. This is of a weight that our current rocket can carry anywhere. Our Sputnik proves to the world that we have the first ICBM, the ultimate weapon.
The Cold War ignited a clash of two opposing ideologies, democratic capitalism and totalitarian communism. When World War II ended, the United States and the Soviet Union emerged as world superpowers. However, the Soviet Union wanted to become the world's strongest military and scientific power. They accomplished this goal through Sputnik, a simple satellite. Sputnik, a Soviet guise for nuclear superiority. In 1954, representatives from over 70 nations, including the Soviet Union and the United States, gathered to establish a global scientific venture called the International Geophysical Year, or IGY, where over 30,000 scientists agreed to cooperate in the investigation of the Earth and its environment. In July 1955, U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower announced that the United States will launch a scientific satellite as part of IGY under the name Project Vanguard. Within days, the Soviet Union proclaimed that it too would launch a satellite. The Soviet space program was originally for purposes of developing a military missile capable of delivering nuclear weapons, and with two successful intercontinental range ballistic missile, or ICBM launches, this was possible. But because of the United States' satellite program as part of IGY, the Soviet Union pushed for the development of a simple orbiter, Sputnik. On October 4, 1957, the Soviet Union successfully launched Sputnik 1, the world's first artificial satellite, or man-made satellite capable of orbiting around either the Earth or the Moon. Sputnik carried a radio transmitter and a variety of instruments designed to measure the density of the upper atmosphere. This technological achievement ignited a state of shock and dismay around the world, especially in America.
Sputnik came as a shock overseas. The American military and others realized that the period when they were out of reach had ended. A new era had begun, when instead of a Sputnik, a nuclear weapon could not merely circle the Earth, but land where it was ordered to.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask me?
President Smith of the United Press, Russia has launched an Earth satellite. They also claim to have had a successful firing of the intercontinental ballistics missile, none of which this country's done. I ask you, sir, what are we going to do about it?
Within the United States, the primary reaction was fear. With Sputnik, America, which esteemed itself technologically superior, had lost its superiority to the Soviet Union. Therefore, the United States accelerated its space program in order to gain a foothold in technological dominance.
Oh my goodness, we were terrified that they were going to put, some kind of nuclear devices up in orbit. Because there's Sputnik and it's orbiting it. They can actually put up things that can fall down on us. Oh, that was real. It was real.
If Russia wins dominance of this completely new area, well, I think the consequences are fairly plain. Probable Soviet world domination.
The event drastically transformed the political, military, and psychological climate around the world, serving to heighten the division between democracy and communism. However, the Sputnik launch in October emerged from a very different Soviet space program. In 2007, NBC released Post-Space Age Secrets Regarding the Soviet Union. The article entitled Space Age Secrets Revealed 50 Years Later outlined that Sputnik originated simply from the frantic development of a rocket capable of striking the United States with a hydrogen bomb.
There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that the Soviets were committed to this program to use primarily for military purposes, whether they were to be platforms for spying or platforms from which they could deliver weapons.
The Soviet Union lived under the pressure of the possible American attack against them, because United States was able to destroy Soviet Union, and Soviet Union, even they had the nuclear devices, they could not reach American territory. And it was endless discussion in the Congress when America will start a war against Soviet Union, how many cities we have to destroy, that depend on how many nuclear bombs they had.
The ability to reach American territory with nuclear devices came on August 26, 1957, when the Soviet Union reported that it had fired accurately an intercontinental ballistic missile. The text of the Soviet announcement read in part, "A super long-distance intercontinental multi-stage ballistic rocket was launched a few days ago. The tests of the rocket were successful. They fully confirmed the correctness of the calculations and the selected design. The rocket flew at a very high, unprecedented altitude. Covering a huge distance in a brief time, the rocket landed in the target area. The results obtained showed that it was possible to direct rockets into any part of the world." After being the first to successfully launch an ICBM, the Soviets wanted to be the first to launch an artificial satellite. When news reached the Soviet Union regarding the United States' plan to launch a satellite as part of IGY, Sergei Korolev, a chief Soviet satellite engineer, proposed a satellite project in order to transcend American plans. On January 30, 1956, the Kremlin approved the project. The development surrounded 3 different satellites for 3 different missions. Object D1 for scientific experiments, Object D2 to carry an animal into orbit, Object D3 a more advanced military satellite. According to the plan, Object D1 would be launched in time for the IGY, and the Soviets hoped this would preempt the Americans' planned launch of Vanguard in the spring of 1958. On September 20, 1956, the U.S. Army launched a Jupiter-C missile on a ballistic flight. Korolev believed that this launch was a secret and a failed U.S. Army attempt to launch an artificial satellite. Fearing that America would launch a satellite before the Soviets, Korolev asked for permission to set aside the original satellite plan and develop 2 simple satellites to be launched before IGY began. A transcribed version of Korolev's proposal in part read, "The USA attempted to launch a 3-stage rocket with a satellite at Patrick Base, Florida in September 1956, and this attempt was kept secret. The Americans failed to launch the satellite. As reported in the press, the USA is again going to try and launch an artificial Earth satellite in an effort to achieve superiority." Korolev received permission from the Kremlin on February 15, 1957. From the new plan arose a primitive orbiter known as PS-1 or Prosteshny Sputnik.
And of course, after that, after launching Sputnik, it was beginning of so-called space race, because it was shock on the American Western world. Soviet Union ahead of us, we want to catch them. And my father understood that it is have big propagandist impact of the successes in the Soviet technologies.
A New York Times article entitled "Politics of the Sputnik" depicted an interview between Nikita Khrushchev and news reporter James Reston, which expressed Soviet satellite intentions. "The Soviet success in launching the satellite into space," Mr. Khrushchev warns, "demonstrates Soviet superiority, not only in science, but also in terrible and pitiless atomic missiles capable of reaching any part of the world."
Of course, he used the military capability because he showed that we can reach American territory, so if he will attack us, we will retaliate.
Between the end of World War II and through much of 1957, speculation surrounded how and when the space age would start. The United States presumed itself to be the pioneer in opening the space age. However, the Soviet success with Sputnik put the Soviet Union in the lead. Sputnik proved that the Soviet Union had the firepower to launch intercontinental ballistic missiles to U.S. soil and any other part of the world, as well as suggested that outer space would become a new arena for warfare. The successful testing of a newly designed hydrogen weapon only 4 days after Sputnik was proof that the Soviet Union endeavored to compete and beat the United States, not only with cutting-edge technology, but also powerful weaponry. Sputnik proved a major turning point that initiated a space race, which challenged American and Soviet competence in attaining military and technological supremacy.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.